today's Targets in Focus, besides looking at some of the traders' favourite pairs, we'll be discussing something slightly different. Nema Ramkhelawan-Bhana is a currency analyst at Rand Merchant Bank with a particular expertise in African currencies, and she's joining me now to chat to DukascopyTV about some of their latest projections. Afternoon, Nema. First off, how do you see the euro-dollar playing out towards the end of the year and into next year?
Well, I think euro-dollar specifically is under a lot of pressure at the moment. Downside momentum in the short term, obviously due to the pressure in the financial markets specifically. We've seen Germany now agree to the terms of the European Financial Stability Fund, but whether or not that comes into fruition is another story, and especially based on the last 18 months worth of experience. I think the markets are quite skeptical around whether or not Europe can come to the party and now deliver on their promises, and as such are discounting in slower growth, particularly in the Eurozone, and also quite a bit of financial stress over the next 2 months, and that in itself is going to keep downward pressure on euro-dollar.
What about the euro-dollar? I understand you're expecting it to stay in a range between 156 and 163 over the next year.
Well, I think the correlation between pound dollar and euro dollar is quite close. So by virtue, or by default rather, you'd probably see the same stress exerted on pound dollar in the short term. But I think what plays in its favor over a longer term period is the fact that the UK will actually act preemptively ahead of the US and Europe in trying to rein in their fiscal deficits. And by doing so will actually put the UK economy on a stronger footing. While the UK has also implemented some type of quantitative easing, they haven't actually responded to the inflationary pressure within the UK just yet. So probably we should see a bit of weakness in the short term, but over the long term, likely to rebound ahead of the dollar and the euro.
Okay, I'd like to move on to something slightly different now, as I know you specialise in African currencies. How has the rand been performing in general recently?
Well, the rand is a high beta play on the global economy, and what I mean by that is simply that the rand is a very liquid currency, and the openness of the South African economy means that it is extremely volatile and sensitive to exogenous shocks. So it was quite resilient to the financial market stress that we saw in August, particularly the downgrade of US sovereign debt, and also in terms of Europe, the developments there. But what we've seen in September is that the portfolio flows, and specifically money flowing into our local equity and bond markets, have actually dissipated quite a bit. So fundamental support are lacking for the rand at the moment, and we've actually seen that weakness translate in the markets over the last 2 weeks specifically. Probably in the short term susceptible to the same stress that euro-dollar would be and most emerging market currencies. But over the longer term we are still quite positive, and we see the rand reverting back to the 7 levels at the end of 2012.
Thank you very much, Nema. There'll be more editions of Targets in Focus throughout next week, but until then, have a great weekend. Goodbye.